The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Hello, and welcome to Everyday Therapy Podcast, where we're talking about therapy things, just chit-chatting with other therapists, trying to spread that therapy juju, and trying to create positive change in your lives through tips, stories, and inspiration. So hopefully we can do that for you guys. I'm JC Rader. I'm a licensed professional counselor with White Rock Counseling. You can find us in Dallas or at whiterockcounseling.com. We are on iTunes, so please, if you love us, rate, review us, and subscribe. You can also donate on our website at everydaytherapypodcast.com if you feel so called to do so, and if this podcast is helping you out or other people out. Today I'm so excited. I'm writing solo today, so no Julianne or Whitney, but I have like one of my favorite people in the whole wide world here, Melanie Wells. So hello, Melanie.
Hello, JC. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, so excited as well. So Melanie is an LPC, a licensed professional counselor, a licensed marriage and family therapist, such a mouthful, and also a supervisor, LPC supervisor and LMFT supervisor. So, and I just feel like I could talk this whole podcast about how awesome you are.
Oh gosh, don't embarrass me that way. Let's start out that way.
Well, we're going to do it a little bit. And I normally don't read bios, but I feel like I have to because there's just so much to cover.
All right.
Right?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go.
Well, first of all, Melanie, I started working for LifeWorks, which is a group private practice that you started in 1999, and you'd been practicing 8 years before that. So like a little over 25 years you've been a therapist.
Is that right?
I think so.
That sounds so long.
Like I did the math and
I think that's about right.
Okay, good. Because I'm not the best at math. That's why I chose counseling.
1993, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That snuck up on me.
And so LifeWorks was so amazing in my development as a counselor. And we use Lifeology now.
Right. We had when we franchised, we changed the name.
Okay.
From LifeWorks to Lifeology because
Okay,
LifeWorks
and it's such a
everywhere.
groovy name.
I think it's
Lifeology.
groovy with
Yeah.
IE.
Yeah. So
I
cool.
think it's got mojo.
Yeah, for sure. And I got that word from Mel. She always uses groovy, and I love it. But yeah, I started my internship there, and what's really cool is they do a group collaboration with all their therapists. So we had 30 therapists whenever I was there. And so every Monday we would talk about cases for 2 hours. And so not only were my clients as an intern getting my head in the room, they were getting every therapist at all different levels input into the therapy room, which is just super cool and very different in the therapy world. That doesn't typically happen.
It never happens.
Okay, it never happens.
Yeah.
And so within that Monday meeting, we talk about like all different things therapy. So, and I told her before we started the podcast today that I think like 98% of the information and the reason I wanted to start the podcast is all from those meetings and from her specifically, which is just so cool. But yes, so let's get into her bio. That wasn't even her bio. So she has written several best-selling novels. So that's super cool and not typical of a therapist, right? Like fiction novels.
Right.
You've taught at the university level at DTS.
Yeah, I taught at the graduate level at Dallas Seminary and Our Lady of the Lake, which is where I went to graduate school.
Okay. And you play the fiddle, and you got a scholarship to go to school to play the fiddle.
I did. So I'm from a musical family, and that's what we did in my family.
Yeah.
And since
That's what we did.
That's what we
Music,
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is so different that you're a therapist now.
Well, it's kind of the same skill set.
Okay. In what way? I'm curious.
Well, writing and music and therapy to me are all very improvisational. And so if you think about what happens in a therapy session, you're working with characters, you're working with dialogue, you're following the story, there's a maybe a subplot, and there are minor characters and major characters, and something that maybe a plot that's developing over time that you might need to pay attention to, and a plot twist. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's the same thing in music. It follows a particular pattern. Like a therapy session and a therapy case has an arc to it.
Yeah.
You kind of know, like, it's about time to wrap it up and we've gotten something done. And music is the same way. It follows an arc that's really predictable, and there's the same thing. There's a major voice and minor voices and harmonies and subplots and all those things. It's all the same to me.
That's so beautiful. I've never thought of it in that way. Like, I've had that experience, like feeling like that is my form of art, but I've never had it explained to me in that way. So that's super cool. And you still play the fiddle, which I love coming to see you play with Deanne and at different gigs. Like, that's just so fun.
Yeah, we're just band bombing now. We don't have...
You just hop in.
We're band bombing. Like...
But she's so good, by the way. So hopping in, anybody would be privileged to get to have her hop in their band, for sure. And so you specialize, I love this, last-ditch marital therapy. So the trickiest and stickiest of issues in therapy, a lot of personality disorders within relationships, just a lot of tough stuff, I would say. And she started, within all of this, she started a franchise. So she's franchised out Lifeology, and they're just popping up everywhere. So, like, I won't even know what's going on. And I've been in Oak Cliff for a little while, wandering around, hanging out, and there's a new one over there. So that's the most recent one, right?
It's the most recent one that's opened, and we're about to open Cedar Hill by the end of the year, which I'm really excited about. But Oak Cliff, they just had their grand opening, and we're so excited about it.
It's the perfect spot for Lifeology.
It is. It's fantastic. It's a creative, area of the city, and it's really coming, of age as a neighborhood. There's all kinds of groovy stuff going on there.
For sure.
But we also there's no appreciable mental health care south of 30, and part of our mission as a franchise company is to bring our mental health services to underserved populations. Okay. So one of the things we do is when we sell a franchise location, people want to put it in a neighborhood where they can, make a living and make a profit, and the therapist will do well. But we comp the buy-in fee for the second location if they'll put it in an underserved neighborhood.
Oh,
so our goal is to creep into South Dallas, where it's like a food desert. It's also a therapy desert, and everybody needs mental health care.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't thought of it that way, a therapy desert.
Yeah, it really is.
Really are those.
Yeah. We're excited about it.
That's super cool. So also you created a nonprofit called The Dog Project. And so Mel is always fostering dogs. If you saw our social media, we posted pictures of her with her lovely little pets, and I've got to babysit them, dog sit them.
That's right, Goliath.
Times. They're so sweet. So I equate you to like the Elon Musk of therapy.
Oh, but he's crazy. He is a little crazy.
Not in the crazy way, though. In like the crazy genius creative way, maybe more so. He is a little crazy, but...
He's a little crazy. I remember reading about...
You have your hands in so many different projects.
I do. And I'm an Enneagram 7. So those of you who saw the Enneagram show...
Yes, the enthusiast.
The enthusiast who's also the epicure, and there's always something new and exciting to think about, and new ideas, and let's just chase this one and see where it goes. That's totally me.
Yeah, into all the fun things.
All the fun things, exactly. And then when it starts getting really boring, you want to hand it off to somebody else so that they can like do all the operations and the things that I don't like to do.
Right.
And that I shouldn't be doing. Like, I'm not good at that at all.
You can own your
faults
there.
Yeah, I mean, I have a creative mind, and I've made peace with that, but I don't have an operational, I don't think in linear fashion.
Yeah.
I'm not good at that, so.
Yeah.
I know people who, when they write fiction, they write out a whole outline for the book, for the entire book, before they write a word. And I just write sort of improvisationally like I do almost everything else. And if it happens on the page and it becomes real, then it's part of the story and I have to make it work.
Okay.
So that's sort of my role.
That reminds me of a therapist as well.
Exactly.
Because some therapists can plan out sessions and I'm sure you just go in and just kind of see what happens.
Exactly.
What somebody's going to bring up.
Yeah.
So cool. And so with all that being said, we are going to talk about boundaries today. And I feel like you are so good at boundaries. And I know you've spoken that like you haven't always been, and you still, I'm sure, probably struggle with it, like here and there, like everyone does.
Yeah.
But you speaking about boundaries in that collaborative meeting just blew my mind. Like I felt like I'd never heard the talk about boundaries in that way, and had it defined to me. And knew how to like set boundaries and what it looked like to put them into practice.
In actual life.
Yes, yeah, with actual people or with myself. So I'm super excited to talk about that today. And it's been really helpful for all my clients in teaching them what you have taught me.
Oh, well.
So, yeah, so it's like trickling down, right? And now we can share it on a bigger platform, which is just super cool. So I'm curious, like, why is boundary work important to you? Like, what makes you passionate about that?
Well, I do marriage counseling. That's my specialty, and
that's important in a marriage, maybe, right?
Yeah, yeah. Something weird happens when you get married. The natural boundary of having two different, you become a family, so that natural boundary goes away.
Yeah.
And if you are living now in the same space, and maybe you were or weren't before, but now you don't have time and geography to create your boundaries for you. So you can't just go someplace else, like they're still there. Right. Marriage is just relentless.
And it's this whole idea of like to become one, you know?
Yeah,
like,
which kind of bothers me as a concept.
I can see that as a therapist for sure.
Yeah, and you know, all the solid research shows that if you don't hang on to yourself as an individual, you're not going to be a good partner, and you're not going to have a good partnership. And by partnership, I mean like a citizenship, a partnership of equals. So like a citizenship, you need to register to vote and know the issues and show up and vote and use your voice. And if you don't vote, don't complain, you know?
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't really vote in their marriages, and then they end up in a place where they don't want to be.
Yeah, I can see that coming from the lack of awareness too, of just kind of falling into that, and then like this is kind of the new normal now.
Exactly. And it's so room temperature. It's like the frog in the water from 7th grade science. Do you remember them telling you about that?
No, please
explain. Maybe you went to a less, I don't know, experimental school than I did. But it was a public school and everything. But yeah, so frogs are cold-blooded animals. So you can put them in a, this is really sad. I don't torture frogs.
We're not doing this
it's
on
just theoretical.
The podcast
We're not going to do this or anything. But if you put a frog in room temperature water and slowly turn the heat up, it will eventually boil to death because it doesn't notice the change in temperature.
Oh, wow.
But if you throw it in hot water, it'll jump right out.
Okay.
Right? So sometimes if something happens to us, we notice it immediately.
Yeah, such a good analogy.
But if it's sort of a slow boil, But that's what happens in marriage, and I hear this all the time, particularly from women, that there's one day where they wake up and they don't know who they are.
Yes.
And they've just sort of let it slowly slip away a little bit at a time, and then one day they're just done. And so that's sort of one of my passions, is to help. Most of the people I deal with that have that issue are women, typically.
Okay.
And my passion is to help them find their voices and find their individuality and maintain connection at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is hard for a lot of people to do.
For sure.
Yeah.
It was interesting. So on our social media, I was asking people, like, do you struggle with boundaries? And we were talking before the show about, like, the word boundaries and how it's so cliche in our field. And we don't, like, it's not really defined out in the normal culture.
Right. And I remember when the book Boundaries came
I have
out.
it.
Do you have it?
Yeah.
I think I read
really
it. What
love
year
it.
was it published? Do you know?
Let's see. I don't know, but we can
It should
look.
be right on the inside cover, right there, where it says copyright. It must have been in the 80s. I'm going to say in the 80s, maybe the early 90s.
It's been a long time. So 1992.
Okay, so right before I got my license. That's perfect. Right. So I was in school, and this was the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So everybody starts talking about boundaries, and we're like, what are those?
The hell are boundaries?
Yeah. And so I came up with a way to describe it that works for me.
Okay.
So I'm from the Panhandle.
Yeah.
I'm from Amarillo.
Yeah.
That's right.
You country girl.
I kind of am. Yeah, I kind of am. Actually,
like a country city girl for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll tell you just a brief, quick story about Amarillo. So
Okay,
I don't live
please.
there anymore, and I haven't lived there in a long time, and my parents don't live there, so I don't go there that often. But
I can't see why.
Well, I know. It's just none of that annoying scenery to worry about. Yeah, so I'm driving down LBJ one day, and I've got the top down on my car, and all of a sudden I get really homesick for Amarillo.
Okay.
Which, how... Yeah. I'm not really exactly sure why. So I'm thinking, is it a song on the radio or what is it? I feel all this sentimental, like really missing it. And I finally realized I was following a cattle truck. And it was the smell of the manure. Oh my gosh. That's a sad story. Funny. But yeah, so it just made me, oh, wow.
It's nostalgic.
Sad. I know.
Cow manure. So, I can relate to that being from Paris, Texas.
You understand
For
what
sure.
I'm saying. Yeah, when it rains and you can smell the money. So anyway, so I have I grew up in a city, obviously, but I spent a lot of time on farms and ranches.
Yeah.
So if you think about boundaries, like fences, so not everybody has a fenced yard, and you might not need a fenced yard, but if you're living out in the country, you got to have some fences.
Yeah, some type of property line.
Yeah. And you have chickens, or you used to have chickens.
Yeah, I still have
chickens.
Yeah, I do.
Do they have a coop?
Yeah, we have a coop and a run.
Okay.
So they have two different
different fences.
Yeah.
Is it the same kind of fencing for both?
It's not. It's
okay.
not. One's like chicken wire and one's hog wire.
What is hog wire?
Hog wire? It's like the square, cute. You should know this.
I should know. I feel so embarrassed. I don't think we have hogs.
No, it's like
in
that.
Amarillo.
You've seen it before. They're making on like all the mid-century modern
yard.
Okay,
the kind of big squares.
Yes, yeah, big square. It's a
wire.
little tougher than like the chicken wire, and then a little bit bigger holes as well.
There you go. Okay,
Yeah.
so perfect analogy. So chicken wire, right, is not really that tough.
It's kind of flimsy.
Yeah. And so, it's to keep the chickens in, and you have to dig the hole deep enough for the chicken wire that it keeps the fox and the dogs and the things out.
Yes.
But that's what the chicken wire is for. And then, of course, all fences have gates that can open and close, right? So you can close it if you don't want anybody to come in.
My gate's broken, but yes, it should.
There you go. See, that's the problem right there. That's a whole boundary
issue
all by itself. Right? So there's the chicken wire, and that's for, kind of a low-level boundary, and you don't need, tons of boundaries with some people. And then there's your hog wire, which I've always left out of this story, but now I know to include the hog wire, which is a little stronger than chicken wire, but right. And then you have your barbed wire, which typically has like more space in it, but it's more serious because you're dealing with larger and more powerful animals, right? You need to keep the cows in. And then you've got your razor wire, right? So that's practically impermeable.
Yes.
And then you've got your razor wire with the rifle towers.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
And so those are kind of levels of boundaries. And so with some people, you really do need the razor wire because they'll climb over any boundary that you set up.
Yeah,
right?
different personality types.
Or people who are abusive, for example, you may need to have a lot of self-protection.
Right.
Or, conversely, maybe you grew up in an abusive situation and you grew up thinking that that's the way the universe works. And so you need all this, razor wire and somebody said sniper towers, one of my clients recently. She goes, no, I want the sniper towers. I was like, man, you want somebody that's a good shot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she had a really difficult childhood and very abusive, and so she doesn't feel safe. So even if she really is in a chicken wire relationship, she's using the razor wire.
Okay.
With
so
the towers.
both ways, it's like on a spectrum, both ways, if you have too little fencing or too much, like depending on the situation, you really have to have awareness.
Exactly.
Of what's going
of what
on.
you need, what kind of wire you need. Yeah. Exactly. And then on any ranch of any size, and you have lived in the country as well.
Yeah.
So you have to ride the fences.
Yeah.
You know what that is?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, Mel.
Yeah. Riding those fences. Yeah, actually there's probably songs about it and stuff, but really it's not that interesting to do. It's not that fun to do.
Yeah.
But you either get on your horse or the pickup, depending on how much ground you have to cover, and you go and see if the fences are intact.
Okay, yeah, we do that.
Right?
I just didn't know that was what it was
called riding the fences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like checking to make sure there's no holes or...
Right. And so you have to maintain them all the time.
Okay.
You don't just put the fence up and then just walk
away. And then you're good.
Right.
Like,
it doesn't work like that.
Listening to this boundary podcast won't keep you in the clear for the rest of your life.
No, it's not a one-shot thing. You got to maintain them, and you got to know what kind of wire to use.
I like that. It really is a practice.
It is a practice.
For sure.
And Sometimes you're dealing with somebody who doesn't have any boundaries, who'll let you cross into their territory when maybe they shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't even realize that you're doing that
in their space,
right.
because they aren't setting up that fence.
Maybe they're not setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, like I mentioned, and so we're all like all over the place. And
yeah. So you kind of expect people to kind of set that boundary and not really have to like tell you.
Yeah, I mean, so I have good boundaries, I think pretty good boundaries, and so I just assume other people do too. And if they pick up the phone, I assume they want to talk.
Yeah.
That's like, don't pick up the phone if you don't want to talk to me.
And it might be like, that is one of those things that like sometimes it's hard to get off the phone for certain people.
Right.
But you would expect them to say like, hey, I got to go.
I got to go.
Yeah,
I'm like,
busy.
okay, thanks. Because now I know what I'm dealing with, right? So the ambiguous boundaries don't really work for me.
Yes.
So you're not really doing anybody any favors by not being clear. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
For sure.
Yeah, you're just kind of putting them in a position where they don't either... They're confused and they don't know what they're dealing with, or maybe they are going to violate your boundaries and not even realize it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So emotional boundaries have to do with, there's a few kinds. So there's relational boundaries that you would have between people. Mm-hmm. Like I said, some people are safer or more dangerous than other people. And then internal boundaries.
Okay.
So we all have our
with
triggers.
Others, and then internally with yourself.
With yourself, and with the emotions that come naturally to you. I think we all have 2 or 3 that are sort of normal for us, from sort of the prime colors of feelings.
Okay.
From the feelings board. Do you remember that? From
oh
the
my
office?
gosh, yes, I still use it and I love it.
So the 7 that we use, I'm trying to think of what they are: pain, fear, anger, shame, guilt, loneliness, and joy.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? And so the other feelings are all made up of some
form of
combination of those things. Yeah. And so with our childhoods and our natural personalities, our Enneagram number, whatever you want to call it, we'll have some sort of natural triad of those feelings that are typical for us.
Okay.
Right. So for me, it's fear, pain, and loneliness. Those are my 3. And I could tell you all sorts of stories about why that is, but it just is what it is.
That'll be another podcast.
That's another podcast, exactly. So when I know that when I feel those things, I have to manage myself, because I'm at risk of doing things that will be not good for me. And not necessarily, I'm not a self-destructive person. I don't have a drinking problem or anything like that, but I might have what I call the festival of self-loathing.
Okay. I love that. Makes it sound cute and fun. Party.
Yeah, like, hey, build a float and, think about what a terrible person you are just because somebody rejected you.
Oh, gosh.
It triggers my loneliness. Yeah. So you have to be aware of what your own risk factors are and sort of build the chicken wire around that. I got to know, like, this is that moment where I'm at high risk for getting depressed on a Sunday or something like that. And I got to manage that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
For sure. Yeah. I want to talk, like, I've never heard you explain it in that way, like with yourself, because we've always talked about boundaries with other people.
Yeah, I prefer to talk about other people.
Okay. It's a lot easier. So I'm proud of you for on a podcast platform. Yeah, good for you. But yeah, I do want to talk a little bit more about that. One way that I describe with my clients with boundaries with themselves is that, or with others, is that like you're basically like defining yourself and your identity and what is your responsibility and what is other people's responsibility.
Right.
Too.
Yes.
Because that's just so hard for some people. And whenever I posted this on Instagram about boundaries, we had about 50% of people said I struggle with boundaries and 50% that said they don't struggle with boundaries. So I thought that was interesting because for you have good boundaries. Ish. I have to really work hard on mine.
Do you?
So, for sure. You know that.
Well, I don't see you that way, but okay.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I do, for sure. So I just assumed everybody kind of struggled with boundaries. But I think it is all about kind of defining like who you are and where you begin and where somebody else begins.
Right. I agree. And it also has to do, and this is where it comes in handy with marriage counseling.
Yeah.
You have to be able to decide what's going to happen to you.
Okay.
Instead of worrying so much about what the other person's doing.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's say that you're in a relationship with somebody who's a yeller.
Okay.
Right?
And I could never do that.
Well, I just don't do it.
Yeah.
That's a rule.
Right.
I have from, that's a boundary I have. Right? And so in that situation, my boundary speech might be something like this. I might say, I have broken the habit of letting myself get yelled at. Mm-hmm. So you can keep yelling and we can end the conversation, or you can bring it down and I'm happy to hear what you have to say, but I'm not going to be yelled at.
Okay.
So I'm not asking the other person to do anything different. I'm just deciding what's going to happen to me.
Okay. So you start with yourself. Mm-hmm. It's almost like people who struggle with boundaries, they kind of just let things happen to them. Mm-hmm. More so than, like you're saying, deciding like this is the way that I'll be treated, or this is the way that I'm going to interact with people.
Exactly. And even more so, let's take that a step further. They also cross over into other people's boundaries, expecting them to change.
Okay. Give me an example of that.
Don't yell at me anymore. Stop being that way. Like, why are you so mean? Why can't you do this or this or this differently? Instead of recognizing this is a person who's got his own issues that he needs to deal with, and I need to expect him to deal with those issues, just not on my time.
Yeah.
Right? So you spend all this time like going into that person's yard and trying to get the weeds out.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, I'm helping you. Stop doing this.
Yeah, I'm helping you, right?
That's like, such a two thing to do.
Exactly.
Like a caregiver and nurturer.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and in marriage, we spend a ton of time. That's why I have a job. We spend a ton of time like waiting for the
job
other person
security.
Forever, sadly. But waiting for the other person to do something different so that we can be okay. Mm-hmm. And what I try to teach people to do is take responsibility for whatever their feelings are and how they're acting them out, and what they're inclined to do, and then make decisions about how you're going to respond to things. Mm-hmm. That's very different from it being a personnel issue.
Yeah, that's
People are
super
almost
different.
Always convinced it's a personnel issue.
Right.
And I'm like, you're the personnel.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's a lot of blaming. I think of like hearing my clients and myself of like, why did they put me in this situation? Mm-hmm. Why are they doing this to me? Why is this happening? Mm-hmm. And so versus like taking that ownership, that responsibility. And you have a really cool tip that you do with clients.
The line down the middle of the page.
I love it. It's so hard for me to reenact it or to do it. So please, will you explain it to us?
I will. I love this trick.
Or how you do it with your clients. Yeah.
Yeah, we could do it if you want.
Okay, yeah.
Do you want to practice it right now?
Yeah,
okay.
Let's do it.
So while you're doing that, you have to pick a relationship that you want to think about.
Oh, gosh.
Am I asking too much? Too much
let
me think.
Let me think.
We can have our listeners practice as well.
Yeah.
Let's do that. So if you think draw a line down the middle of the page. So it looks like this.
Okay, so you have a piece of paper, you draw a line down the middle of the page.
And you put whoever's name is bugging you on the left side, and then you put your name on the right side. Okay. Right? So this would be me, and this would be them, like this. And so then under the left side of the page, you're going to write down all the things that are bugging you.
Okay.
All the things.
Okay.
So it might be he's controlling, he's mean, he yells, he freezes me out, he's always critical, this whole list of things. And these are all the things that you've been trying to get this person to stop doing.
Yeah.
Right. So that's usually a pretty easy list. To make.
It's all the things that you've been thinking about and ruminating on and obsessing
that
over.
You're convinced are the problem.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it's
These
the problem.
Things that you do are the problem.
Yes.
Which is true, they are a problem, right? And then on the other side, this is a much harder list to make. You do whatever your corresponding behavior would be.
Okay.
So if he's controlling, I'm controllable.
Oh.
Ouch.
Yes.
If he's abusive, I might be abusable.
Okay.
Right? If he's punitive, I might be willing to be treated like a child. So I usually go through with my clients and help them make that second list because it's
that sounds super painful.
It's super painful, but it's also really empowering.
Right.
Because it's always been around
control.
about the left side of the page.
Yeah.
Right? So then what I have them do, and I'm just going to give away the secret now because usually I save this for the end of the session. But
it's like
is just tear the paper out, I know, and then tear it up the middle. And then I say, now take a good long look at his list. And now once I say, have you got it? And they go, yeah. And I say, okay, wad it up and throw it away.
Okay, so it's kind of like you're burning the stuff that you're blaming somebody for that somebody else is doing.
Not your pig, not your farm.
Yeah.
Right?
Not your monkey, not your circus.
Exactly. So actually yesterday I was doing this with a client and my foster dog was in the office and she's just new, like she's real super shy and she doesn't really know what toys are yet. So the client wadded the paper up and threw it down, and she pounced on it and shredded it.
Oh my gosh.
It was perfect. I was like, that's awesome.
There it goes.
Yeah.
You gotta keep this dog.
That's not something we're going to worry about. She's a therapy dog already.
Okay.
So then you're stuck with your list. And so then I have them read me their list.
So, and that's where you need to set your boundaries, or...
Yeah, I'm like, this is our to-do list, so read me that list. And it'll sound like, I beg him to change, or I withdraw, or I pout, or I cry, I think about leaving, whatever all those things are, or I freeze, or I yell, or I door slam, or whatever it is. And it's not a good list. Yeah. Nobody's happy with their list.
Yeah, for sure.
But when you think about it, that's a list of solvable problems. And the other list is not.
Right.
And I love solvable problems.
Yeah.
So if you focus entirely on what you need to address about yourself, something's going to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Forever.
It might not be what you thought was going to change by the relationship getting better.
Yeah. Well, or it might
Perhaps.
end.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I always tell people that. But I came up with this exercise after I got divorced. Mm-hmm. And I'd been married for a pretty long time, 15 years.
Okay.
And it's one of those situations where it would have been really easy to say, well, he was this.
Yeah.
It would have been a really fat pitch, why not swing at it?
For sure.
But then I thought, well, I was there for a pretty long time. Might have had something to do with me.
I was in it for 15 years.
Yeah. So what was that about? So I made my
responsibility
list.
In it.
Yeah. And the things on my list were controllable, willing to be treated like a child, afraid of being in trouble, like all this. Like you wouldn't even recognize people. I tell people this story and they can't even believe it.
I've heard you talk about this before, and it just does not sound like
it
you at all.
Because I made it my mission in life, to not be that person anymore. Yeah. And once I threw the other list away, I never thought about him again. I never missed him or resented him. I wished him well. It was so liberating to not think, gosh, I hope I don't choose that guy again. Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To be able to go, you know what? I'm not going to be that person anymore. I'm not going to be the person who can be treated like that.
Yeah. It seemed like you kind of developed trust for yourself and kind of believed that.
Yeah. And I can't say I was great at it. Like I totally swung to the other side for a while.
Appreciate
I was like
that
walking
honesty.
around my dukes up, like, don't even bother. Like, don't mess with me.
Your razor wire.
Yeah. I had the razor wire.
For
exactly.
sure,
with the
sense.
towers. Yeah, for sure. For a while. Yeah. You didn't want to mess with me for a little while after that. But then I kind of got back to the chicken wire.
Yeah. I think it's so important. And what I share with my clients sometimes is the things that they can control. So this is like this exercise is an example of that.
Yeah,
like things that I can control are my feelings, my thoughts, my behaviors, and actions.
Right.
And I can't control your thoughts, your feelings, your disappointment, how you treat me.
Right.
Like I can ask for my needs to be met and ask for things to change or be differently. But ultimately, I don't have control over it. And that's like, so I have to constantly remind myself, and it's hard to sink in. Yeah. Because as a 2, so on the Enneagram, the caregiver nurturer, we're notorious for kind of being manipulators. We're like the best manipulators, but it comes from like a very like sweet, honest place. Like we look very altruistic, but underneath we're trying to gain control of how you treat me, because I really want you to love me and to appreciate me and to treat me in this very specific way. And so it's really letting go of
that
all
agenda.
Of that. Yeah, of that agenda.
Exactly. And being sort of emotionally autonomous.
Yes.
So that you can actually be in relationship with somebody else.
Yeah.
And maintain your wholeness.
Right. Because an authentic relationship is me having control over my feelings, thoughts, and behaviors, and somebody else having control, and us having relation while doing that.
Right, exactly. So I'll tell you a quick follow-up story to my line in the middle of the page.
Please.
I may have told you the dishes in the sink story.
I don't know. Tell me again.
Well, what's important about one of the things that's important about that exercise is to know that whatever those 3 feelings are and whatever those behaviors are, you're probably always going to be at risk for them.
Okay.
Because you can't change your personality, and you can't like wash out your entire childhood. You just can manage it, right?
Damn it.
I know, right?
Right. Yes.
So,
for sure.
Yeah. So fast forward several years later, and now I'm with Dennis, who I'm now married to. And at the time we weren't married, and I was at his house on a Saturday, and I can't remember why he wasn't there, but I was there. And, you've met Dennis.
Yeah.
He's like Mr. Hospital corners.
Yeah.
Like you could do surgery on the floor of our garage, and I'm not exaggerating.
If there was
it's
a
actually
non-severe form of OCD, it might be him.
He calls it an attribute,
Okay,
like a feature.
I like that.
He thinks
He's
of
a
it as a feature.
perfectionist.
Yeah, like all the bottles in the
feature.
refrigerator, like they face this way, and he doesn't
That
really.
is so not you.
It's so not me. No. And so I'm at his house on a Saturday, and I have to actually be someplace on time because, I'm late all the time.
Yes.
And I don't remember what it was that I actually had to be at. And I just fixed myself some lunch and eaten some lunch. And I was like, ooh, I can either leave the dishes in the sink and make it to my thing, or I can do the dishes and be late. And I had that pit in my stomach feeling that I used to get in my first marriage where I was in trouble all the time.
Yeah.
And it was real visceral in any of the psychotherapeutic yoga that you've talked about,
Yeah.
like it shows up somewhere in your body. So I got this like stomach thing and I just kind of froze there by the sink. And I was thinking, well, what should I don't know what to do here because I don't want him to be mad at me. So what do you think I did?
Did the dishes?
Worse. I called him to warn him
Okay.
that I was going to leave him in the sink.
Just to let you know.
It sounds so dumb. So he goes, okay, because I'm calling him to tell him there's going to be dishes in the sink when he gets home. So I realized immediately, I thought that was just a relapse, man. I just, I did my drug. I relapsed and I went back to my old unhealthy ways. And so
I've really considering somebody else's.
Just thinking I'm going to get in trouble.
Okay.
I'm a grown-up woman. Like I can't get in trouble. That's
right.
silly.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be inconsiderate, but I'm not going to, like, that's not the reason to do the dishes.
Yeah.
Because you're afraid you'll get in trouble. Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So when he got home later, I sat him down, and he knew my ex, and he knew my story. And I said, I need to tell you why I
called you.
Yeah, why I called you to warn you about the dishes in the sink. And I told him, the story, and he said, well, I just want to be clear. He said, if I get mad because you leave dishes in the sink, that means I'm an asshole. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. So don't put up with that.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I've evolved enough where I'm now somebody who won't be treated that way, and I've matched up with somebody who doesn't treat me that way.
Right.
I just went back there myself.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that you really have to practice and maintain awareness of what's going on for you, like within relationship.
And that if you're not that person anymore, then you don't really fit with somebody who's like that.
Right.
Right? What if you know what I mean? He's just not the person that I would have attracted before.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, because I hear so many clients saying, like, why do I keep attracting this person?
Yeah.
And it is like...
It's because you're portable.
Yes. I love that. You're portable.
Unfortunately, you go everywhere with yourself and you take your patterns and your habits with you. And I've been telling people lately, like, you can train anybody to treat you that way. Mm-hmm. Sadly. Like, if you are going to act like this consistently. I
like thinking of it in that way. It does give you a lot more control that you are, like, training people in some sense of how to treat you.
And you can train them to treat you badly, too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So when Dennis and I first got married, he was doing my laundry all the time. Right? Because he's it's like going to the mountain. Any stain you have, he can get out. And so, of course, I just let him do the laundry.
Right.
I'm not going to start doing it.
Why not?
So eventually he felt like I was crossing his boundaries. He felt taken advantage of because I'm like letting him do all the laundry. But of course I did. Yeah. So he kind of trained me to treat him that way.
Exactly.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, for sure.
Yes.
And I feel like so many people can relate to that.
Yeah.
One thing you said earlier that I want to go back to is that I think sometimes a lot of people within relationship are doing things out of fear and guilt. Rather than out of love. And I think that is like that is a healthy relationship and goes along with setting boundaries, is
for sure
doing it out of love rather than fear and guilt.
Yeah, you don't do anybody any favors by operating that way.
Right.
You just really don't. There's a really good book by a woman named Susan Forward, and it's called Emotional Blackmail.
Okay. Give me the high points of it.
Well, the high point is, and it's a really good book. Well, it's like you don't need to read the book. You can read the book, but she uses an acronym FOG: fear, obligation, and guilt.
Okay.
So you know when you're in that fog and you don't know what to do.
And it's like a perfect, the fog.
I mean, we all know what that feels like.
Yeah.
That's usually fear, obligation, and guilt. And that's not a good motivation.
Right.
So if you're functioning out of that and you feel that like foggy feeling where you're just stuck and maybe it shows up in your chest or wherever it shows up in your body, that should be the red flag flapping in your face going, I'm about to do something really dumb.
Yeah.
So I need to just get a grip on myself.
Pay attention. For sure. Yeah. And I feel like, so with boundaries, like we've been saying, that I think it starts with the awareness, and then you can set the boundaries, and we can talk about that. Oh my gosh, we only have 20 minutes left, or really 10. But I did want to try and get to being responsible for people versus responsible to people. So this is kind of a technique that you also created for your clients within relationship. And so I think that would be helpful with people trying to create awareness of like, okay, where am I lacking boundaries and how do I know if I am? And then we can get to the tips on what to do.
Okay. So the way I usually talk about this is that so there are several, there are 2 columns on this sheet of paper. One is about what happens when you're responsible for people, and one is what happens when you're responsible to people.
And responsible for is kind of being controlling, and responsible to is caring for people.
Right. That's the difference, basically. So I usually start in this middle box where it says I feel. So it's typically how you feel if you're going to be responsible for.
Yeah.
In that control column. Do you want to read the list to me?
Yeah. So if I'm controlling or responsible for somebody, then I'm tired, anxious, fearful, responsible, angry, guilty, embarrassed, lonely, and rageful. So those are not fun feelings.
No. And usually when I say, does that sound about right? They go, yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Maybe not all of them, but most of them a bunch of the time. And I'm like, okay, we're probably on the right track then. We probably need to talk about this.
Yeah.
So if you're walking around feeling like that, you're probably
then there might be a boundary issue.
There might be that's a clue.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Hint.
Yeah, you're probably walking around being responsible for, so you're doing the things in the first box, which are
trying to fix, protect, rescuing, controlling. Love this one. Carrying other people's feelings, not listening, and joining in.
Right.
So, gosh, those are so good.
I know, aren't
they?
Most people don't know what carrying their feelings is, but that's that contagious mood that happens where if somebody really dominant in the family comes home, everybody freezes up. Or if you grew up in a home like that, you can tell by the way somebody's keys hit the kitchen counter without even seeing them what kind of mood they're in.
Yes.
Right.
And even on other levels of what, I don't want so-and-so to be disappointed. So I'm not going to do something so I don't disappoint them.
Because their feelings are my responsibility.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you're going to walk around doing those things, you're going to feel tired, anxious, lonely, fearful, all the things that you just read.
Yeah, that's your part and what you're doing.
Yeah, and you're going to feel that way. It's normal to feel that way if you're trying to do all this stuff that's not really a solvable problem.
Right.
Right? And so then you typically are concerned with
the solution, answers, circumstances, being right, details, and performance.
Right. Ouch. So you spend a lot of time on those things, and it's usually about the other person.
Yeah.
Right?
And there's never, I feel like, that just
it's
doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It never works,
Yeah.
but we have the fantasy that it will. And so you end up being a manipulator, what does it say?
Controller, and a disabler.
Yeah,
so
and
taking
I
the
prefer
responsibility.
disable to enable because when you overdo for somebody, you rob them of the opportunity to rise the occasion.
Yes.
So you don't want to disable people by doing all this stuff and convincing them that they don't have any responsibilities.
So true.
Yeah. So you end up, your self-worth is very fragile because it's based on all this going well, which isn't possible.
So my self-esteem is going down whenever I'm doing all this stuff because I don't have control of myself.
Right. And you never get the result you want.
Yeah.
So you're constantly frustrated and, disappointed
just
in
feel
yourself.
Inadequate and yeah.
So the alternative is what we're shooting for, and that's the responsible to.
Okay.
So
and this is caring for people versus
so if you're going to care
controlling.
for people, instead of fixing, rescuing, controlling, and all those, you're going to do.
I'm going to show empathy, encourage, share, confront, level, and listen.
Right. Notice the words that aren't in that list.
Yeah.
Fix. There's no fixing. There's just listening and showing empathy and empowering
being there.
people.
Yeah,
right? I'd rather empower you than fix it for you.
Right.
That would be better for everybody. Right. So, and that encouraging and showing empathy is really, it's so empowering when you do that for people. Like, you know what, I'm confident that you can handle this. I know it sucks and that you feel terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm here for you, but I'm confident that you can do this.
Yeah. I know you're resilient and you can.
Yeah. It's going to suck.
Yeah.
But it's
and I don't need to save you from it. But I can be here.
I can be here. Yeah. So as therapists, we try to stay on this side of the page. Because otherwise we just walk around and be crazy all the time.
Yeah.
So you're congruent and relaxed, right?
Yeah. So, I'm going to feel like more laid back.
Present, aware, having the ability to enjoy things.
I like this aware of reality.
As opposed to constantly
trying to do something that you don't have control over.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're concerned with?
Relating to the person, not the solution. So relationship, that empathy piece. And I believe if I just share myself, the other person has enough to make it.
Right.
So that's very different from the solution to answers being right, the details of it.
Right. And I think if we're living on the left side of the page, we have this fantasy that everything's going to come out the way we think it should in the same timeline we think it should. So it's not going to, probably.
Yeah.
So they have what it takes to make it, but it's not going to look like I thought it was going to look.
Right.
So sometimes it gets ugly, and then I panic.
Yeah.
And then I might want to jump back in and try to fix things because I'm thinking, oh no.
That's that like awareness piece of
Exactly.
noticing whenever it comes back up.
Yeah. So,
and then you're the helper, the guide, and the friend versus
the partner, the spouse,
controller.
Yeah, exactly. And so your sense of self is really stable if you can walk around and live like that, which is kind of hard to maintain, but it's like maintaining boundaries. It's like riding the fences. It just takes some self-discipline, mental self-discipline.
Right. And coming back to it whenever.
Constantly. Yeah. And if you feel those feelings, that's the red flag
okay.
in your face going,
hey,
whoa,
wake up.
I'm out of control. I got to get it back. I got to get a grip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I love this exercise so much. I think that it's so helpful.
I do too.
And
people
it's
put
so
it on the
simple.
refrigerators.
Yeah, it's so simple.
The hardest part is just emotionally, and that's an internal boundary, emotionally letting go of the outcome.
Yeah.
To just be able to say, it's not my universe.
Yeah.
Like
It's
the
not
universe
for
has
me
been
to
going a long
handle.
time without me being in charge. So
Yeah.
I think I can step out of this.
What would you say are some difficulties with people being able to maintain boundaries or set boundaries?
I think typically they feel really guilty, like they're doing something wrong, like they're hurting the other person, right?
Okay.
So that's one thing. So
like not being nice. If I set a boundary, then I'm not being nice. They were taught for some reason that no boundaries are nice.
Right. But really, you're not, like I said earlier, you're not doing anybody any favors by letting them run all over you.
Yeah.
That's not a thing. So
yeah,
that's not
so
good.
Get that out of your head.
Yeah, it's a much better relationship if everybody knows what the rules are and where the chicken wire is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you can see everything. That's what I so appreciate you and running your business, because it was so very clear in working with you.
Good.
Yeah.
That makes me happy to hear.
Yeah, where everything was and how everybody was going to be treated and what everything looks like.
Yeah, and that's good to hear, because I'm really at risk for over-functioning for everybody and like codepending the entire staff because I want them to like me.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have to be able to go,
check in.
If you don't like me, that's going to have to be okay.
Yeah. And I think that like it's important for people not to internalize the guilt and using that empathy piece of like you can empathize with somebody, like if they're trying to place guilt on you of like I get that this is hard for you,
right,
but I'm deciding not to take it on.
I'm not going to take it on. Exactly.
Yeah. And that is uncomfortable. I love Brene Brown's boundary mantra, and it's choose discomfort over resentment.
Oh, that's so good.
I love it so much. Because it's uncomfortable to not take on the guilt and to not change or to say no to somebody you love and care about.
Right.
Like it's initially in that short term, in that moment, it's hard to do. But in the long term, you aren't going to feel resentful.
Right.
And you aren't going to feel that anger, that tiredness, anxiousness, all those feelings that we talked about.
And have you ever heard that thing that resentment and bitterness are like taking poison and hoping the other guy dies?
Ooh. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, there's such poisonous feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't need that. Don't carry that around. That's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that because my reaction whenever somebody tries to put guilt on me is to be defensive and to kind of show or tell somebody like why they shouldn't be putting that on me or, whatever. But the what you're supposed to do is that empathy.
Yeah.
Of like
I feel it.
Like I get it.
For you.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
But so it's kind of interesting that's like the reaction that we typically have.
Yeah.
That reflex.
Until you get the hang of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you're comfortable with the chicken wire. For
sure. Well, do you have any resources or anything that could be helpful for listeners that you think of?
That book is like pretty much says it all, don't you think?
I do. So the Boundaries book, When to Say Yes, How to Say No, to Take Control of Your Life by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. We'll list it in the show notes, but for sure, I think that it's super helpful in defining boundaries and kind of telling stories of what they look like.
That and Emotional Blackmail, that's a great book.
Okay.
And then I'm sure that Mary Miller mentioned Mating in Captivity.
Okay, Mating in Captivity. That's more like sexual boundaries, I would think.
Well, it's really about having your own self.
Okay.
Which involves all the things that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So that you can be like sexually present in a relationship that's in close proximity with
I've
somebody.
never thought of that book in that way. I like that.
Yeah, it's about being whole. And there was a book before that, I think it was called Passionate Marriage.
Okay.
That was basically the same concept, but a little goopier.
Okay. Yeah.
A little bit more specific.
I love that so the Boundaries book, like you said, it's been around for so long.
Yeah, it's kind of a classic.
We really don't have to reinvent the wheel.
We don't, no. In fact, I was telling
stuff.
a client once to read that book, and she goes, oh, I can't read that. I used to date Townsend.
Oh, gosh. That's too funny.
Yeah, so I'm sure there are other ones out there that
you
can also read.
If that one doesn't fit for you for some reason, let us know and we'll find something else for you. Any last things that you would like to share with our listeners about boundaries that you think would be helpful?
I just hope that people, I hope that people don't fall into the trap of thinking, well, I set the boundary, but it didn't work. Because we have the idea that if I set the boundary and they don't change something, then the boundary didn't work. But the boundary is not about them.
Okay.
It's about you. They don't have to change anything.
That's so important.
Yeah, it's super crucial. Yeah, because you're thinking, well, if I set this boundary, then he won't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But really the boundary is I'm not going to be yelled at anymore. Yeah. So I'm going to excuse myself. I mean, you can choose today. What is today? October 25th?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can choose today, October 25th, 2018, I almost said 1990, at 3:52, to have been yelled at for the last time.
Okay.
Or frozen out for the last time, or whatever it is. You can choose that for yourself, and you can, just not let it happen to you anymore. It doesn't matter who's standing on the other side of the room.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yes.
It's great news.
Yeah. Yeah. Take control of your life, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. And seeking out a therapist or these resources or something to support you through that, because this is hard stuff.
It is hard stuff, but there's a ton of help out there, and there's a ton of help out there. A lot of great therapists in this town, because I know that I trained some of them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, tell us where we can find you and the best way to get in contact with you and all that good stuff.
Okay, well, you can find me at wefixbrains.com, which is our website.
Love it.
And I work in the Dallas location, but we've got, I think, 7 or 8 locations now.
How many therapists do you have now?
In Dallas and Fort Worth, still 30.
Okay.
That's sort of the magic number that works well and for that group. Yeah,
I can see that. But total, you probably have like...
Yeah, I want to say
lot.
we have 12 that are in the can, and we're in Grand Rapids, Michigan now, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah,
and
super cool.
Yeah, but wefixbrains.com, you can find me, and I'm in our Dallas office.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we will definitely have to have you back on because we didn't even get to half of the stuff that I wanted to talk about today. But please, if you love us, you will go to iTunes and rate, review us, and subscribe.
Oh, for sure.
And all the listeners out there, please do that for us. And you can find us at whiterockcounseling.com. And give us some feedback. Thank you, guys.
Or ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
This is a Mel move, I feel like.
Yeah.